This day in sports history.
It's April 25th, and on this day in 1950, Chuck Cooper became the first black athlete drafted into the NBA. 3 years after the integration of Major League Baseball and 4 years after the NFL truly integrated, the NBA was still an all-white league. But on this day, with the 13th overall pick of the NBA draft, Boston Celtics owner Walter Brown selected Charles Cooper out of Duquesne. Now, that caused quite a stir in the smoky room of all-white basketball executives. Here's Cooper's son explaining what happened next.
One of the other owners said, "You can't take him his color." And Mr. Brown said, "I don't give a damn if he's striped, polka dot, or plaid." Boston takes Charles Cooper out of Duquesne University because he's the best player available to help our franchise.
It was a risky move, and Cooper understood the chance Brown had taken on him. And shortly after the draft, Cooper wrote Brown a note saying, "Thank you for having the courage to offer me a contract in pro basketball. I hope I'll never give you the chance to regret it." Cooper does not hold the distinction of being the first black player to actually play in the NBA. Due to scheduling, that distinction went to Earl Lloyd, who was taken with the final pick of this same draft by the Washington Capitals. But, as he tells it, he wouldn't have had his opportunity if not for Brown selecting Cooper earlier in the draft.
I happen to be the first to play only because my team was scheduled to play October 31st, and the Celtics plays November 1st. I truly believe if Chuck had not been drafted by the Celtics, that given the racial climate in Washington, D.C. in 1950, there's no way the Washington Caps are going to step up and draft me.
Nat Sweetwater Clifton was signed to a contract by New York later when they hired him away from the Harlem Globetrotters. Cooper went on to play 4 years with Boston before getting traded to Milwaukee.
Hey, you've heard me talk about the Sterling Soap Company for a while now, and whether you've jumped on board and smell like an absolute champion, or you've been a little hesitant, then here's a great opportunity for you. We're giving away a $75 gift card to use at sterlingsoap.com. Sterling Soap is 100% natural and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance to win a $75 gift card to the Sterling Soap Company. I've put a link in the show notes as well. Now, let's get back to the episode.
On this day in 1980, Billy Martin had to be restrained from going into the stands after a fan. Now, at this point in his managerial career, Martin was in his first year with the Oakland Athletics. He had implemented his aggressive Billy Ball philosophy into the team, and a renaissance was underway in the Bay Area that would eventually lead them back to the ALCS in '81. Well, on this day, the Athletics were on the road in Minnesota. But to understand this story completely, you've got to go back to October 1979, when Martin got into a bar fight with Joseph Cooper, a Minnesota Marshmallow salesman. I won't go into the specifics of that one, that's for another day, but suffice it to say that barroom altercation resulted in Martin getting fired from the Yankees for the second time. The game on this day got off to a rough start for the Athletics. Starting pitcher Matt Keogh was getting roughed up in the first inning, giving up 4 earned runs and just couldn't seem to get the final out. Martin went to the mound and pulled Keogh after 2/3 of an inning, bringing in Matt Souza to replace him. Now, on the walk back to the dugout, Martin saw a fan chucking marshmallows at him. Billy sidestepped the soft pellets, but he didn't exactly appreciate the act. Billy hurled a couple of expletive-filled sentences his way before going to the dugout. Now, things seemed to settle down, well, in the stands at least. The team was still getting shelled on the field, giving up another run in the second and 5 in the fifth to trail 10-1 by that point, and Martin had replaced 2 more pitchers without any more sugar bombs from the seats coming his way. But in the top of the ninth, Martin stepped out of the dugout briefly, and the marshmallow barrage started again. Now, this time, Martin was not having any of it, and he was screaming and yelling as he tried to get at the fan by climbing over the railing. An assistant coach and the home plate umpire were able to grab him before he went over the rail, and they pulled him back to safety. The fan was ejected after that incident, and Martin was still pretty hot after the game, saying, "The Minnesota fans are good fans. This was just one guy acting like a jerk. There's no room for that in baseball. I can tolerate a lot of things, but I can't tolerate throwing stuff onto the field." On this day in 1978, the Phillie Phanatic made his debut. Now, the Phillies actually had a pair of mascots already. Phil and Phyllis, a brother and sister team that looked like oversized dolls in colonial clothing, but their heads were really large and they weren't really able to do much more than just walk around. So the Phillies organization wanted something a little bit different, and they approached the guy who had become synonymous with big furry creatures, Jim Henson. But Henson wasn't really a designer, and so he pointed them in the direction of Bonnie Erickson, who had done a lot of work for Henson on The Muppet Show and Sesame Street. Now, you will undoubtedly be familiar with some of her earlier work. She designed and built Miss Piggy, as well as Waldorf and Statler, the two old heckler guys who sit in the box there in the theater. Well, Bonnie and her husband Wade agreed to the idea, and they started working on a design. Bonnie drew inspiration from a poster that she saw in the Phillies PR office.
They had a slogan, which was be a Phillie Phanatic. I took that as wanting to have a megaphone, so that's where the snout for the Phanatic came from.
Now, her idea was that no matter who wore it, simply walking around in it would look funny. Bonnie designed a completely fantasy animal that we know today with the green, furry, pear-shaped body. Oh, and it also had a backstory like all the other Muppets. The Phanatic evolved in the Galapagos and grew to be a huge baseball fanatic. Now, another thing about this is instead of having a big rollout debut, announced in advance and coming soon or something like that, the Phillies decided to just let the Phanatic walk out unannounced and start walking around.
Everybody decided to just let him appear, not to make any big announcement. This was the Phillies fans. You weren't going to force them into anything. And so he just sort of appeared. He came on the field. The costume looked clean, bright, and got a lot of laughs. And it's the laughs you're waiting for. So all in all, that first day was a big success.
In bonus, the Phillies beat the Chicago Cubs 7-0. The person inside the suit has changed over the years. Dave Raymond was the one inside on this day, and he wore it for 15 years.
We don't want you to be the chicken. Go out and make this is family atmosphere. And so I that's what I did, and I think that direction released any of my fear. I couldn't fail. And if I failed, it ended up being funny, because the first few moments of being in the costume, because I hadn't had much practice, I actually tripped and fell. And when I tripped and fell, all the fans went, "Oh!" And that, over the next couple of months, that's what we did. Bill would say, "Hey, why don't you go try this?" And I would say, "Hey, I think I want to do this." And everything was yes.
Since the mid-1990s, Tom Burgoyne has been the main guy inside the bright green outfit. There are 3 others who wear the suit who make it out to as many as 800 gigs a year. The Phanatic looked the same for 42 years until a lawsuit was filed by the Ericksons in 2018. There were some minor alterations made by the Phillies to get around the lawsuit, but eventually the suit was settled in 2021, allowing the team to go back to the original design that was rolled out on this day in 1978. Oh, and Phil and Phyllis were retired in 1979. Let's keep it going with another fun story. This one happened on this day back in 1962 when a player was traded for himself. His name was Harry Chiti. Chiti was a catcher with Cleveland, and on this day he was sent to the New York Mets for a player to be named later. And yeah, you can see where this is going now, right? Chiti played 15 games for the Mets, hit below the Mendoza line in that span, and then the Mets decided that the player to be named later would be Chiti, who was sent back to Cleveland on June 15th, becoming the first player to ever be traded for himself. Since then, it's happened another 3 times. John McDonald was the most recent player to be traded for himself back in 2005. On this day in 2003, Mo Cheeks won Good Human of the Day honors when he stepped in to assist the National Anthem singer when she started to falter. It was Game 3 of the first-round playoff series between Portland and Dallas. 13-year-old Natalie Gilbert had won a contest for the opportunity to sing the national anthem prior to the game. After singing What So Proudly We Hailed, she got mixed up on the lyrics and things went south in a hurry. After a 10-second pause, Trailblazers coach Mo Cheeks walked over, put his arm around her shoulder, gave her some encouragement to get going again, and then started singing with her.
All right, come on. Starlight's last dream.
Stars like
Last dream.
last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streamed.
Fans soon joined in and started singing along as well, and they were both able to get to the end. Gilbert was incredibly grateful afterwards, saying, "He totally saved me. I couldn't even remember the words. I tried to start over again, but the words wouldn't come. I was walking off afterward, and he said to me, 'Don't worry, kid. Everyone has a bad game once in a while.'" For Mo Cheeks, who dished out nearly 7,400 assists in his basketball career, this may have been his best. But in a true full-circle moment, just last month, on March 12th, 22 years after her first attempt, Natalie Gilbert got a chance to sing the national anthem again at a Trailblazers game, and she knocked it out of the park. In the house that night, sitting behind the opposing New York Knicks bench, was Mo Cheeks, smiling like a proud uncle at her perfect rendition. No assistance needed the second time around. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. I'm not saying that George Washington doesn't deserve a lot of the credit for the crossing of the Delaware, but give a little nod to the future 5th president, James Monroe, too. Monroe was part of the advance team that crossed the Delaware before Washington. He was shot and wounded by Hessian forces in the subsequent Battle of Trenton. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.